Hello everyone, welcome to ReTour. If you are returning, welcome back, and if you're new, thank you so much for coming. This is our third of our virtual ReTour series, and it is UK Part 2, which has been supported by BCO. Over the years, as you'll have just seen, we've had 2 live events cycling all over London in 2018 and in the pouring rain in 2019. And this year we've taken ReTour virtual. This is a series of webinars which kicked off covering London, and we have now been able to widen our view. We've already had one webinar that focused on the UK, but as we found out, there's just simply too much to fit in. And so this is part 2 and is the third of a 5-stage tour following with the rest of the world and then Europe. So if you have had any thoughts about projects for the future sessions that you'd like to see, please contact us and there will be a link at the end. Today, for this stage of the UK, we have a panel of 3 guests from Barton Wilmore, 4 partnerships and Active Commuting Limited. For those of you who have attended previously, it's going to follow a slightly different approach and we're changing it up. And Neil Webster, who many of you will know, who has led the way on active travel in Remit Consulting and been a spokesperson for cycling throughout the industry, is going to be chairing a panel and conversation with our guests. The rest of the team are still here, and George Halin, Sarah Waller, Sarah Raid and Andrew Barber have all been working diligently on the series in the background, and you might see George and Sarah pop up in the chat or managing the polls throughout. Speaking of, if you have a Q&A, we will be asking questions throughout the session, so please pop them in the Q&A section at the bottom, and there is a mug up for grabs. The best question will get a ReTour mug, so please get your questions in and we will pick that at the end. If you do tweet, there is a hashtag ReTour cycle. Please feel free to share it with your friends and let everyone know what interesting things you're doing this evening. And we are intending to finish at 6 o'clock. So without further ado, I'm just going to introduce our panelists. First off, we have Jenny Montgomery from Barton Wilmore. Barton Wilmore is the largest independent planning and design consultancy in the UK, and Jenny's role looks to identify market challenges and growth opportunities, as well as collating learning and sharing best practice. One of the key areas that Jenny's been working on is the development and delivery of Greenkeeper, which is a new tool for the built environment sector, which helps give a better understanding and valuation of urban green space in terms of their economic, environmental, and importantly, the social value that they deliver to the local communities. Alongside Jenny is Aurélien Collignon, and Aurélien is an associate director at 4 Partnership. 4 is a forward-thinking real estate investment platform that champions sustainability and social impact within the built environment with a view to driving long-term change in outcomes. 4 is actively managing over 600 million euros worth of real estate in the UK and across Europe, and Aurélien heads up portfolio management, sourcing and structuring real estate transactions and seeing them throughout the life cycle of the properties. I'm also very excited to have 4 here because they're one of only 4 real estate companies that are certified as a B Corporation within the UK. Last and not least, they're joined by Andrew Reichten, who's a keen cyclist and was frustrated by a lack of cycling provisions in the built environment. And in 2014, Andrew took matters into his own hands, setting up his own company, Active Commuting Limited. By applying modern modular construction solutions to traditional real estate issues, Andrew's been able to provide end journey travel plan solutions to the active travel community, be that cycling, running, or even scooting. And the aim is for these facilities to become embedded in the transport infrastructure, creating a network of active commuting hubs. So with everyone introduced, I'm going to hand over to Neil, and I look forward to seeing all of your questions in the box at the bottom.
Thanks, Melissa. So yes, Melissa's going to pick up any questions that you throw in, and we may even pick them up early on rather than later. So this feels to me like having 3 people round for dinner who love real estate and love active travel. So I'm very much looking forward to this as well. So I don't know if we could kick off, Jenny, if you just give us a sort of few insights as to the input and the importance of active travel in the early stages of developments, in the sort of planning stages.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much for having me. I think it's a really interesting challenge at the moment on the back of everything that's happened with COVID and where everyone sits, and I'm sure we'll come on to it. But I think one of the key things that we're finding, we're a planning and design consultancy working across the UK on all sorts of different projects, all different scales. And the key at the moment is that planning legislation only moves so quickly, and invariably there is a big lag time between published legislation and really where communities and where society is. And so we can't really wait for planning to lead the way on this. It is trying, and it is trying to do lots of things, things like tactical urbanism and driving things that just happen overnight, but it's not the fastest moving system. And so we have to find ways, you know, it's a little bit, we had a discussion when we chatted before as a group about chicken and the egg. And the planning system is quite a reactive tool. So we have to think about how we can drive things proactively on all our schemes.
Jenny, can I just go back to that phrase, tactical urbanism, if you don't mind? Because I think some people might understand it and some might not. So what do you mean?
So tactical urbanism is when we just changed the street landscape, for example. So there's been a lot more of this in America than we've seen over here, if I'm quite honest. But it is starting to happen here, and it's exciting, and it happened during the first lockdown, which was great. It's slowly picking up pace. But it's basically when you shut off streets, when you change the way we use urban environments because of, you know, potentially at the moment because of the temporary environmental changes that we're seeing, but also because we can see that we want to accommodate more cycling, we want to just try something. So we're trying to shut streets, we're changing surface finishes, we're maybe making a street into just a cycle street, or your low traffic neighborhoods in London. They were more planned, so they're less tactical. But in America, New York, for example, you're seeing streets change overnight to just try something different and see what happens. And what's really exciting about it is it doesn't get stuck with the need to consult and the need to debate and fight about something. It's more about, let's just try it. If you hate it, we'll take it away. If you don't, it might work, and it could change your life. So, or at least change your street.
And what examples in the UK, Jenny?
There's been a few. So I know that Oxford's doing a few where it's been blocking off streets and trying different things. A lot of it looks a little bit crap, a little bit like we just shoved a bollard in the way and now you can't drive down that street. But the idea that just testing it and see how people feel has worked in some places really well. I know it's worked really well in Oxford, where the restaurants and stuff were able to pour out onto the street over the summer and things like that. I think the main ones that I've seen that have been really successful have been in New York, where they do look really good. But I mean, there's plenty of people on this call probably who've tried are aware of other good examples as well.
And do you regard things like parklets and the like as tactical urbanism?
Yeah, absolutely.
Or do they need consent?
Yeah, they probably do. More so. I mean, I'm not a planner, so I'm not about to go into what doesn't need consent. But yeah, they'd probably be a bit harder to deliver. But I think just trying to think of our streets more holistically, I think that's what tactical urbanism really does. It makes you think about how you use it, so it's not complete car domination all the time. It's not all about segregating different uses. I mean, the example I've got, if you want me to show you, is very much about how you can have very much a shared space that allows, that encourages cars to slow down, but allows everyone to move and use space in a slightly different way.
Please do. Show us.
Yeah, I think George has got my slides for me very kindly. So the example I'm giving you isn't, where are you starting? You're halfway through, George. Hopefully, anyway. I'll try flicking on a slide, see what happens. It'll work in a minute. So this example is an urban regeneration scheme we've been working on. So not so much the commercial accommodation, but an urban regeneration scheme in Salford in Manchester. It's a really contentious site in that it's been in planning for years and years. It's a 70s estate regeneration scheme. Which you can see on one of the slides if we can get them to work, but I don't know if it's going to. Anyway, it's quite a difficult one to make work. But what was really obvious from the moment we looked at it was there was a great opportunity to join up cycling infrastructure across it. It's in the middle of a 70s estate, so it's big, wide, horrible roads. Some of them haven't even got pavements. And we worked on it as planners, designers, landscape designers. And we're looking at bringing in, shame I can't show you the pictures, but bringing in infrastructure that is a shared space. So it's not just shared space, though. I think there's been some negativity about that in the press of late. It's a cycle street, so it allows a lot more combined kind of activity. So cars are there, bicycles are there, pedestrians are there. You change the surface treatments to try and help people understand that it is a different kind of environment, but also a shared street, a cycle street, sorry, allows you to bring the street much closer together. So you've not got this massively wide pedestrian, cycle, car, cycle, pedestrian. You can bring it much closer together and make a street feel far more domestic. You can't really see from these pictures, but maybe we'll come back to it in a second.
No worries, Jenny. So this is Salford, yeah, you say?
This is Salford, yeah.
And so is this part of the whole sort of Greater Manchester Beelines type of initiative, or was this Salford's and your initiative beforehand?
Predates all of that, because the Boardman stuff's coming through slowly and is really exciting for Manchester. This kind of this site's been around for so long, it kind of predates it, but there's been a good chance to kind of revisit it and relook at it in the last 12 months while we've been working on it, and look at how it can better knit into the existing infrastructure that's there and the infrastructure that's proposed. But I think what's really interesting is how quickly you can get into the local authority if you're going in there with a positive message about active travel, particularly in those local authorities that have zero carbon ambitions, and those local authorities who have a challenge with inequality in health and well-being, which Salford certainly does, and particularly on this estate. So you're able to open that conversation up a lot quicker if you're going in with a very positive kind of, we're going to help drive and help support your active travel ambitions through whatever we're going to produce. And that allowed us to then negotiate quite a lot of changes and quite a lot of variation from previous permissions that have been granted on that site, because we were able to offer them something of far more benefit to sit alongside it. And it's made it a lot smoother through the planning process. So I think it's worth thinking about how you can engage in those conversations.
So I'm glad you brought that up, Jenny, because we had a poll question which Sarah could put up, which is almost asking that question, which is, in relation to, active travel and the planning process. So you've raised it. Maybe we'll put that out to the participants while you continue on, and I'll just sort of reference it when we're finished. But there we go. Please do give us your views that relate to very much what Jenny's just said there. But go on, Jenny. I might even bring Aurelian in, actually, if you don't mind, without going into the detail from a point of view. But how much do you support what Jenny's just said, Aurelian, given this sort of quote about sort of not easing the planning process, but certainly making the conversation easier?
Yeah, sure. I mean, everything she said, whatever Jenny says, I'll support. But absolutely, there's a lot of things that actually have been mentioned already. And hi everyone, and thank you for having me, because this is a discussion which is probably has more depth than what maybe most people can think. Planning process is probably the kind of the layer that people get. Like they think, okay, if I do a scheme which has the right amount of cycling racks and kind of the right access, and if I kind of play ball with the local authorities, I'm going to have a smoother way through to my consent, which is absolutely true. Like there is a clear cut, like there is data, there is everything, there is our own experience at 4 which can demonstrate that we definitely get a different reception when we push the door to the planning department, the council, and we introduce ourselves and we say, this is us. Like, let's not talk about necessarily massing straight away, because developers love to talk about the number of stories and how high they're going to go, and the square footage, which is absolutely vital for the economical viability of the appraisal. Absolutely. But when you start to engage about what is the council trying to achieve, how do they actually go about thinking about mobility, what are the changes, this straight away ties in with sustainability and social aspects of what they're trying to do every day. I mean, this is you're pushing on an open door. So we have an asset we're building up in Glasgow, and we started to have discussions about the COP26, which is due to be held in Glasgow this year in November. Whether that's going to happen or not, discussions, maybe that could be postponed, sadly. But and then we started to have discussions with the Scottish government, and they were trying to find places just to organize events in town, and without knowing specifically, looking for buildings which were having values and ethos and visions. But when we started to say, okay, this is CADWorks, this is our building, this is what it does, this is the amount of facilities that we're going to have, these are the social organizations that we work with already, I mean, they were absolutely delighted. They came back to us the day after, and we're trying to do something which is going to be very special in that building now for COP. I mean, I've got a bit more. I've got a few things that I've put on slides.
We'll come back to that, Ren. I was just trying to sort of make the link between you and what Jenny was saying. So to sort of take it back to Jenny, with the support you've got there of Aurelian for what you said so far, are there particular places other than the sort of example in Salford that you could reference as sort of examples that, you know, prove the point or lead on to, you know, a wider discussion?
I think there's some really exciting stuff going on across a number of cities within the UK already. I think, well, through our work on Greenkeeper that Melissa very kindly referenced at the beginning, we're working with a number of cities on their green infrastructure plans and how they can better understand their green infrastructure portfolios in terms of the health and well-being that they're delivering, but also how they're connected and how they allow immersion in green. So the idea that you could do your whole travel to school or your whole travel to work through green space, and then put a value on that to understand the social value it's delivering. But through that, we've had engagement with some really exciting cities like Plymouth, who's massively going for it. They want to be a net zero and I can't remember what they've called it, but basically reducing everything right down, and they're very ambitious about it, and they want a full citywide green infrastructure plan set up, which is quite exciting. And so they're heavily driving active travel as part of that. Similarly in Coventry, where you've got a cycling mayor, I mean, you've got a great, invariably where you've got good leadership and good ambition. So that's why Manchester's flying so well, because you've got Andy Burnham and Chris Boardman going for it. So there are plenty of places and a number of London boroughs that are trying different things. I think, you know, the low traffic neighbourhoods have come in for a lot of flack, but they've, you know, they're trying different things, which is really important. You've got to try these things and see what the problems are. And London is leading the way with some of the cycling infrastructure design manual stuff that it has and the ideas that it's got. So I think there's some great stuff happening across a number of towns and cities, but I definitely zero in on the net carbon cities, the ones that are most driven by all of this really at the moment, aren't they, understandably.
So you referenced Plymouth, so I'm aware that they've got this mobility hubs initiative on at the moment, which does have an aspect of e-cars as well as about sort of micro mobility about as well. But I think what you said almost sort of adds more to our second one when we were saying there's more of this around now. You know, this seems to be, you know, it seems to be the norm. Active travel's part of real estate development. You know, it used to be perhaps that it was, you know, fitting in a few cycle bays here and there in a building, and now it's mainstream in the front end of development, which is, you know, the question I'd asked you right at the start, really. Yeah,
definitely, and rightly so, really. I mean, there was a really good article this week about, you know, how we can't let electric vehicles dominate the discussion around reducing our carbon footprint. There has to be both, and we have to try and accommodate as many modes of travel as we can, really. And the active ones are the best ones for us in so many different ways. So yeah, and I think getting it up front in your discussions is absolutely paramount, definitely.
Yeah. So I think I hadn't looked at it. I just looked at the questions, and I think we've answered one of the questions without actually seeing it yet, which was my question to you about the B lines and Manchester and Salford. So
yeah, I think that all of that stuff is emerging really well out of Manchester. It's really good. So yeah, this will connect into that infrastructure and will be an added benefit to it as well. But it has a particular resonance with the local community in that estate, which is what actually was the tangible kind of move for Manchester City Council, or Salford, sorry, in supporting it.
Yeah, and for us, you're making a nice link back to the previous session when we had Media City talking about the cycle hubs there. So thanks for the moment, Jenny. We'll come back to you, obviously, as we discuss. And Aurelian, we brought you in already in relation to you know, supporting that view about the active travel support. I wonder if you could just take us through a few things across the country, given that, you know, you're not a one-trick pony in one town or one city. Yeah. And some of the sort of issues that you've dealt with and faced and tried to achieve.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to. I mean, I've got if you allow me to maybe share my screen, because I think that's going to help putting a little bit of context around the some of the things that I'm going to talk about.
We won't take a vote. I'll just say yes.
All right, that's good. That would work, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
There we go. So just to talk, just to put a little bit of context around, for partnership and the type of projects that we do, and why does this is relevant to us, and why would that be relevant for any developer? Four is as Melissa mentioned, we've got about 600 million of under management currently, which we're not part of the kind of huge machines out there, but we like to think we're not too small, so we start to have a portfolio where we can steer and have an impact on what we do. We've got mainly offices, a little bit of residential, alternative residential. So the living sector right now is becoming more important for us, a key area of focus. And we've been doing investments about 1 million square feet over the past 10 years in the UK and Germany as well. And what we really focus on is that everything we do, although it is bricks and mortar, and I'm a construction engineer by background, so I think that's really where I come from. Kind of put a wall up and make it better. We always have this lens of sustainability and ESG, like the wider ESG considerations. So social element as well for us is really, really key. So I am not a cycling specialist. I think we do talk about mobility as a whole. It's one theme for us, and it's part of a wider system. So it's much bigger than just that. What is our vision? Our vision is really that we're going to be able to drive a low carbon world through the leverage of what we have, which is really property. So the built environment to drive that kind of carbon agenda. So we're committed to be net zero carbon by 2025 as our own business for partnership, but also across the portfolio. We've become effectively, as you mentioned before, B Corp certified. So which is something which goes again just beyond just mobility or just a portfolio. It's really looking into how businesses are behaving, how they structure to make sure that they have the right governance. And we have a few things. So as I said, UK GBC, we've committed to the net zero target, and ReTour first, which is for us trying to improve what's already there in terms of infrastructure rather than start again and build again in order to tackle the carbon agenda. Some of the sustainability achievements that we have, so you can see that some of these credentials are well known, others a bit less, but we think about sustainability, energy consumptions, but also design, new technology, connectivity, so where it's core. BREEAM, of course, and then at the bottom of the slide here, you can see that this is much more into thinking about the impact that our projects would have on the local community. So before we start, we like to spend a little bit of time. When I say a little bit of time, I actually mean a lot of time, understanding who lives there, who works around in the area. We meet with the council, we meet with the business owners, retailers, just to understand what are the challenges that they have, because we're going to come and have a kind of big plot of land, and then we're going to do something with it. We're going to refurbish the big building. So what are the themes that we need to tackle? And mobility fits right into some of these schemes that we have. So you can see that we have a partnership with Brompton, for instance, Swifty scooters or Soul Riders. These ones are right into the kind of mobility in the sense of bringing that community back to active travel, to allow them to make the healthier choices, but also get back into work. So there is always an outcome which is targeted. And then I've mentioned the COP26 in Glasgow, which is kind of our key focus right now across the portfolio. One of them, this is CADWorks. So this is our project called CADWorks. It's 100,000 square feet of kind of office. And then when you look at it, it's obviously kind of a pretty standard building. So what we wanted to do is design it from the inside out to make sure it was addressing all the things that the local area, but also the local authorities, the council, and our future occupiers would demand and need. So CADWorks, in a nutshell, will achieve BREEAM, well, and WARE score, EPC. I'm not going to dwell on that, but it's going to have a really active basement area and a reception area as well. We spend a lot of time designing around the cycling facilities there. So you've got quite a lot of cycling racks, for instance, which are different kinds as well. So above what the BCO guidelines would be, but also lockers, which are USB lockers. You've got some high quality showers, iron boards, and you've got stretching areas. So if there's everything you need to make sure that people can have the choice to at least say, okay, I can definitely now either run into the office, I can cycle into the office. And there are some other things, as I mentioned, because it's part of a wider system. So we are working on biophilia. We've got a large green wall in the reception area, which gives a lot of benefits to occupiers as well. The technology, so smart meters everywhere in the building, so that we know exactly how the building works, and so on and so on. So again, mobility for us is part of a wider system. So this is the type of facilities that you would have. This is the first kind of cycling ramp. So from the street level, automatic door will open. You don't need to put a foot down. You just whiz your way through into the building. It's the first one in Scotland, but for us this is kind of common sense. This is fun. This is the right thing to do, and this is really a key appeal for occupiers as well. And then don't make it necessarily like a boring afterthought that you sometimes see at the back end of around the corner, the back of the basement, that this is not good enough. But again, we can come back on these features, because the outcome, the aim for us is not to put cycle racks in a basement. The outcome is to allow people to make healthier choices as well. The rest of the building is going to look interesting as well, but this is really what is needed for occupiers in terms of corporates now. They need to make sure that there is some flexibility in the way they work, some flexibility in the way they get to the office, and their staff will demand that. I mean, I've got personal anecdotes as well, because as for partnership, we changed, we moved offices, so we have been on the hand looking for options. And I know how critical these facilities would be. I know that Andrew was the same when he was kind of looking for his next move at some point in his career. And the cycling facilities can just be the one thing that make a decision go in the right direction as a developer. And then finally, just this is also CADWorks. So this is the upper floor of CADWorks. So it looks great. This is a fantastic view. There's a lot of light, but this is not what it's about anymore. So I think this is what it was about as a developer for the past, you name it, 10, 50, 20, 50 years, whatever. 600 by 600 grid, suspended ceilings, raised floor, everything is works well. But occupiers are not interested into that anymore. They're going to pass that on to their technical team, and no one's going to get excited about that part of the building. So you need to think about what's happening at the top, rooftop, what's happening in reception, what's happening in terms of your facilities, shared amenities, flexibility, because that's not going to get you to let the building, or it's not going to get you to get your planning consent much faster. So that's a little bit of the kind of the context.
Thanks, Aurélien. I think it'd be quite good, Sarah, to share the results of that first poll at this point. And actually, we've got 2 or 3 great questions to come on. So I think that result suggests that there is definitely a good correlation, and that it's just a degree to which that correlation exists. With only is it sort of 3% here saying not at all. So I think we should all be sort of grateful for that sort of result from the poll. So actually, in order to bring Andrew in without actually Andrew doing sort of his presentation, so to speak, at the moment, I'm going to ask one of the questions, so that I've got potentially an answer from each of the 3 of you, but I'll let Andrew have a warm up and go last. So from Erland here, it's is there a correlation around, possibly Wild summarizes supply and demand? So is there a correlation between local authorities, mayors, planning policy, all of that sort of supply piece, and what the user demand is, i.e. suggesting Oxford, Cambridge, Manchester being higher demand areas? And likewise, is there an opposite correlation as well? Are we getting the supply in the places where the greatest demand is? I don't know if Jenny, you'd like to go first because you're off mute, but if we took it, Jenny, Aurélien, Andrew, in that order.
Sure. yeah, I think it just happens naturally that that's the way it goes, because they're the locations where you have the lobbying groups and you have the power from the people to kind of drive that change and that change of habit. I mean, I live in Reading, and there isn't a huge cycling culture here. There isn't a huge amount of provision, and it is kind of swaying onto James's question below. Actually, it is a battle to deliver some of these tactical urbanism responses that they'd really like to do, because there is such a volume of negativity towards it. So I feel like there is definitely a correlation. Obviously in Cambridge and Oxford, where there is a much larger use of cycling and active travel. But it shouldn't be the case, really, should it? But I think it's just the volume, and that's why you've got to kind of make that noise as developers and property sector ourselves, I think.
So I agree with you, Jenny. Let's call it a strategic level, so at a city level, perhaps. And we'll come on to Rayleigh in a minute. But you could argue something like, and I've mentioned this before, Kensington High Street, where you've got a huge amount of sort of local demand. It seems to have been thwarted by a minority of interests. So perhaps, in answer to Ellen's question, yes, apart from some examples which, perhaps are hopefully one swallow. But anyway, Aurelian, do you have a view as well?
Yeah, I think the answer is yes, and there are maybe two sub-answers to that, which is first tying up to a point that Jenny was mentioning right at the beginning, which is some local authorities are kind of have an agenda. They're kind of pushing to try to make improvements to their street, also the way that their infrastructure is being mapped currently. Sadly, I think some of these are probably, I mean, I don't want to be too harsh because I know it's a massive job, but it's just not happening, fast enough, or it's not tangible enough. So I think some of these authorities, although they clearly have an agenda, a path, maybe as developers, but let's not call it just developers, as private businesses, it is still difficult to come in and then fulfill that demand that could be there, because you feel like you're not speaking the same language, and it's hard to work together. I mean, we end up doing it with some local authorities and councils across the UK, but it definitely demands a lot of time, energy, and thinking. And then the second sub-answer to that, if that's not too complicated as an overall answer, is that absolutely yes, because when I was starting to work on CADWorks, actually this one, we looked into some of the statistics, and then came up this one that I think it was I can't remember who did the survey, but if you were to go in the street and just ask everyone out there who wants to cycle to work, you have 50% more women would want to cycle to work than men. When you look at all the facilities that you have in buildings, the split is usually 70-30, but the other way around. So 70% is really male dedicated and 30% is only women dedicated, because women would want to do more, but they can't because the infrastructure is not there, and because they don't feel security is a key issue for them to cycle. So I think you have the demand there, which is clearly there, but it's completely subdued because the infrastructure is not ready. So I think as local authorities will push that, the demand will really follow. The demand is already there.
You give me a great line to bring Andrew in then, Aurelian, with the infrastructure not there, and you're really wanting to do it instantly, sort of thing. So I don't want you to sort of do your piece yet, Andrew, but do you have a view on this bit about demand supply? Because I don't know with how what you've come across yourself.
I do. I've cycled in Hong Kong, Tokyo, and London for work, right? So I've got a bit of an idea of where's friendly, where's not friendly. To me, I think going to demand that Aurelian touched on, from my own experience, is if it is encouraged, if you've got the facilities there, you build it, they will come. So I understand sort of BREEAM or the sort of, let's say the regulations or whatever you want to call it, the template for how many people out of a workforce will actually cycle to work. Provision is meant to be around 10%. But I've worked in two of those cities where at times 40% of our desks were cycling in, and it was about having the provision. Yet in the same place, I've been at different firms where there wasn't any provision, and no one cycled in. And you're talking like for like, type of people. So my question is, you can say there's no demand if you're not providing something.
You mean some people think they can judge demand based on the supply that exists there, which is a bit of a crazy economic argument, isn't it? But,
yeah.
So Andrew, why don't you, because I know you got a couple of slides, why don't you just tell us about your experience today?
Okay, so I've always worked in financial firms, investment banks actually, primarily in the city. I've been cycling into London 15 miles for 10 plus years. The biggest, so what happened to me was I was moving shops, and I was talking to two different firms, same package, opportunity, etc. One had cycling provision, and the other was, sort of sort it out yourself. So I joined the one that had the cycling provision, and fantastic facilities. Okay, everything's good. I get there, I talk to HR sort of a week in after all the induction stuff. Hey, can I have a bike parking space? Yeah, you can, but there's a 14-month waiting list. So the lockers were oversubscribed. You couldn't get a locker. They didn't even bother having a waiting list anymore. Changing rooms were fantastic. Drying rooms, excellent. But what they had to do was they had made some temporary provision. I mean, you can kind of work it out yourself. If people are average taking 25 days holiday a year, a certain amount of your workforce is not in every day. So they were able to utilize some of those spaces for people who were on the waiting list. The only problem was you had to apply, you had to write an email Sunday night after midnight, and it was 1 week in advance for a week, okay? And they were usually all gone by 12:05, okay? So 5 minutes after midnight. And you couldn't put it on a timer because we didn't have timed emails, right? So there was no way to sort of cheat the system. You had to stay up midnight on a Sunday to get yourself done a week in advance. So we were sort of thinking, me and my brother were like, there's got to be something here that we can do. So is there something that we can take? 2 seconds, hey, can you take boss? There's got to be something that we can do.
Can you type, Alex?
There's got to be something that we can do. Let's see if we can get, like a space that was maybe a garage or storage or something like that, see if we can convert it. And the example I've got is a place in the Barbican. So we had a look here, we went down there, it looked like an old garage workshop. It had waste, water. It was literally just a concrete floor. It was pretty messy, it had pigeon nets in the top. And we said, look, can we put some showers and stuff in here and put some bike racks and rent off you? Came back from the landlord, you've got 3 years max, and anything you do, I want to put back as is now. Okay, so the dilapidation costs, it wasn't going to be worth us investing. Dilapidation costs were going to be nasty. And you're like, there's no point to this. Let's think of something else.
What sort of year was this, Andrew?
Yeah, 2014. So we thought we got to make it. We need to protect our investment, right? I know it's just showers and lockers, but and the racks. So we thought we've got to make it portable. we started looking at containers and stuff, you know, to thinking that they could move them. Box Park was up the road, so that was sort of the inspiration. We learned that basically upcycled containers, you can't move them after you've adapted them. So we started, we actually talked to some modular building companies, and we took a look at their anti-vandal buildings, and we thought, well, they can move those, you know, they've got like 20 years life on a construction site. Maybe that's something that we can use. So we sort of put some renders together. I mean, the first render George has got, if you can show that slide. If not. Okay. So as you can see, it looks a little bit containerish. So we put this out. Part of it was to try and get some land, and we thought, you know, if we could put pressure on some landlords, you know, sort of feel that there is a demand there, something might happen. It got retweeted by Sarah Jane on Sky, and it got picked up by Cycling Weekly, who then did an interview with us. That got published, and one of their head surgeons at New South Glasgow Hospital saw it in Cycling Weekly and told his head of facilities to give us a call. So I get a call on a Saturday afternoon at a barbecue. I can remember it vividly. And this chap says to us, New South Glasgow Hospital, we've just had a new hospital built, really like this idea, would you build them for us? And it was like, it wasn't really the plan, but we will do now. So that's how we then thought, right, other people are seeing that there's a reason to have this. So we built a demonstrator. We tweeted that. Jason Bradbury off the Gadget Show saw it. He hit me up first and said, hey, does this actually exist? And I said, I told him yes. And he retweeted it. And then a site director from GE Healthcare saw it on his thread and told us to come in for a chat. And
it's great, the power of social media in this, isn't it? It seems your Twitter is at the center of something. And Andrew, how long does something like this get to you know, be from start to finish, approx? Okay,
well, we can build it in 12 weeks.
Right.
And
which links back to that earlier conversation in a way about, you know, if there isn't the infrastructure now, build it, and you can potentially in some places do it quite quickly.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a retro solution. We get that. But we think because it's sort of pocket size, we only do things in like 3 sizes, so there's only 3 choices, etc. But it's not going to cater for more than, I mean, if you look at, that's the bike store there on the right. In that bike store, you've got 56 bike parking spaces. And that's roughly in 6 car parking spaces.
And why, Andrew, do you think this is particular to the, let's call it the health market? Because a lot of what you've done has been on hospital sites, isn't it?
Yeah. Yes, well, actually, it's about, it's slightly more on the hospital sites, but we did GSK and Telefonica as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think for the hospitals, and that they get it. They really, I mean, anyone who's seen their local hospital, there's always a car parking issue, right? But how can you expect the staff not to drive if they can't park their bikes? And one of the things that we do know is there are issues. The general public can walk on a hospital site, right? And it's very easy for them to have access to most areas. So, you know, there is a lot of bike theft. So it makes sense that if you're not providing something that's safe, you know, if it's kind of like a bit of roulette, whether your bike's going to be there when you want to go home in the evening, that has been an issue.
So I think you raise a really good point, Andrew, in relation to visitor parking here. So the point's been made that quite a lot of yours is, let's call it, public space. So I wonder if Jenny and Rena got a view about this. If we say that originally this was when we started on this journey, it was, let's say, exclusive parking. It was in office buildings. It was for the tenants and for the users. Do you now think that people are thinking beyond that? So they're thinking just beyond that building into the public realm. And I can come back with something afterwards, but I'd like your views first. Andrew, sort of given us the sort of link to this in a way. Ladies first, already, unless you want to jump in.
No. Okay, well, I'm going to go then. I think it goes beyond that than effectively just the inside the building and this private area. As you said, I mean, this is the easy answer. You would expect me to probably say that, but the reason why I say that is that one, there is, you can see big developers, going back to what I know best, but investment managers, asset managers, developers that are owning large pieces of land or real estate of almost kind of neighborhoods. You would know some names in London, for instance, that would kind of control several buildings. Find it much better and easier, and actually they become much more relevant to try to curate this whole space as a full regeneration space area, rather than having just the one building. So what it gives you is that you can effectively start to play with what is inside the building, what's classified as being private, with the space which is in between buildings, which is public. How these buildings will interact with each other, how people will move from one side to the other. You see how the Regent Street area has been done and reworked in terms of where the pedestrians can go, where cyclists could go, where pavement can be enlarged, and how buildings can be refurbished in between. So for big developers that own all of that, it's absolutely fundamental to think about what is the space which will allow people to get there to their private area, which would be working area, this basement in the building, but also outside. So when you go to the shops or when you go in between buildings. The challenge, therefore, is for smaller developers like us, when we have the one building, and we see that we're currently investing in refurbishing, repositioning buildings in London, Glasgow, I mentioned, but also Bristol. We're looking into Birmingham, Manchester very much, where we have a building up there. So this one single isolated building, this is much more challenging to try to make it blend into the public realm. So you control about 2 meters of pavement surrounding that building. So what are you going to do with it? You're going to start to maybe put some hoops, like cycle hoops outside. Yeah, okay, that's it's a good side, but is that going to really change dramatically everything? No, probably not. So what we've done in Manchester, we've got push scooters in the basement. So it's a fleet of push scooters which are branded Windmill Green, which is the name of our scheme there. They are Swifty scooters. So they've been made by a local business. It's a husband and wife business, which is getting quite a lot of exposure now. So you're tapping into that local community. You're giving your users, end users, your tenant occupiers, the means that they need to do what they have to. So going to a meeting on the other side of the Manchester city centre with grabbing for free just one of the push scooters. Then the brand of the building is on that push scooters, is getting out. So it's brilliant for us. We don't need to charge anything. It doesn't cost almost anything in the grand scheme of that development. But then you start to blend the inside, the outside, the public, the private, and you address some needs. So I think, yes, I mean, it's absolutely critical to think about that. The other thing, for instance, that we've done is we have a specific and very strategic partnership with Brompton, where we have, outside of a few of our buildings, we have a rental pod, if you want. So you've got big lockers where you have Brompton folded bikes, which are also branded to the scheme, so Windmill Green bikes. And we give our occupiers a code that they can just go and unlock their Brompton bikes and keep them for 1, 2, 3 days a week if they want, and they just pay as they go. So these are just simple ways, and they almost don't cost anything to make it more. It
seems to me that you're embracing the whole micro-mobility agenda, which is part of the active travel agenda. Jenny, do you want to add either from a sort of examples you might have or a view you might have, either or both?
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody across the development industry is being encouraged to think beyond the red line boundary, whether that's a single building or a site. You know, we all have to knit into wider infrastructure and, you know, drive councils to use our Section 106 or our SIL monies in the appropriate fashion to get what we need for the communities we're creating or the work premises we're delivering. So I think absolutely we have to think beyond the building. But what I think is really interesting about what Orion said and Andrew is the way, and what we've seen on the ReTour trips over the years, is the way that this is now being celebrated. You know, the idea that the branding and the fact that we're looking after our health and well-being of our employees in our workplace or our communities and our new communities or regeneration projects, whatever, we're shouting about it because it's such an important part of what we're trying to deliver. It's such an important part of ESG that Melissa was talking about, and so it does come front and center, and that's right. So it's going to get louder and it's going to get more, you know, spilling out onto the street and bigger because it's to everyone's benefit that it does. Which is just a personal observation, but I think it's really, really interesting to see how that has shifted massively. It's not that crappy back door anymore, you know, it's really big branded logos, you know, celebrate what we're delivering and how we're delivering it. Quite
so I know we most of us here, in a sense, celebrate as you said, but perhaps it goes back to what Aurelian said earlier, which he's not a cycling specialist, but you know, he's embracing that active travel agenda within real estate, which is what we've been saying for a little while, but you know, it's part of the whole picture really. And
do you, if I can, Neil, just add very briefly, because I think something that Jenny's mentioning is the fact that now it's all being celebrated. I think one of the recent realization I just had, it happens, you know, every now and then, but the latest one is that people on a personal level, people have always got quite excited about some of the things, like for instance a green wall, you know, the push scooters, good cycling facilities. I mean, like on a personal level, as an individual, when you walk into a space where you see all of these, like beehives, for instance, all of these kind of sustainability and more personal touches, you feel good. You feel good about the place. Like this is, you know, that this is the right thing to do. But so far, and I say probably like until, you know, 2 years ago, 1 year ago, we can debate a little bit, but the decision and the process that was behind these individuals, which was more driven by, you know, companies and corporates, and was not paying attention to that. That was not part of the list effectively. So the person was saying that looks great. Unfortunately, what I need is a 600 by 600 suspended ceiling, and I need this kind of lighting. But now what has changed is that companies are speaking the same language as their staff. So everyone gets very excited. Everyone is very excited and saying, oh, we absolutely need to have top quality showers. Like this is absolutely a requirement.
Aurelian, we didn't rehearse this, but we have a poll question which relates to the amount of active travel that people on the call might be moving towards. I call it post-lockdown rather than post-COVID, because we're going to be living with COVID. So I don't know if Sarah could put that up. Excellent. So if people wouldn't mind dealing with that poll whilst we come to, sadly, towards a conclusion, really. Not yet, don't worry. So what I'm going to sort of try and wrap up with is almost, and I hadn't thought of this way, but I have now, is a link question to our next session, which is going to be the rest of the world. So Jenny talked about the United States earlier. I wonder, in your businesses and what you're doing, where you've taken inspiration from. And please don't say the Netherlands first, but you're allowed to if you don't get another one. Already, I'm sure we'll be able to reference other countries, and obviously Andrew's mentioned Hong Kong and elsewhere as well. So I'm gonna let Jenny go first. Definitely ladies first this time, really.
No worries. So I think chatting to the guys that delivered Pendleton, which I was talking about earlier, it was Paris that was inspiring them there, because of the kind of green infrastructure delivery combined with cycling infrastructure, which is something Paris has come to very late potentially, but it's getting quite excited about over particularly the last 6 to 8 months. So they've been looking at that quite closely. They've also looked at some in the UK. There's some stuff in Waltham Forest that looks really cool that they got really excited about as well. So there is stuff within the UK, but I think it's Paris, and I would say the Netherlands. That picture that did come up for Pendleton was the Netherlands. Sorry.
No, you don't need to apologise, and you know, we will be going to the Netherlands at some point on this tour, so that's great.
I look
Andrew,
forward to that one. Can I go?
you can. You can bring your ReTour mug as well. So Andrew, any other countries that have cities or countries that have inspired your business?
Yeah, we've actually had inquiries from all over, from Asia through to the US, particularly California recently. I've cycled from Denver to Boulder, Colorado, and understand that people do that regularly as a commute. You know, so
how far is that?
I will have to check with one of my guys, but I think it's about 25 miles.
That's a serious commute.
It's a serious commute, but there's nothing in your way. And you know, you're right beside the highway, and the traffic is you can see all the traffic there, and you know, it's a great route. It's well lit, linking two centres. What's there not to like? But from our point of view, I'm kind of surprised that we have seen this interest from the US, you know, in the product and elsewhere. Germany as well are the two sort of standouts of the inquiries that we get beyond the UK. So clearly it is a demand that is getting more global. I mean, I've only named 3 countries, so I can't really say it's global, but certainly there is something there. There is something that needs to be addressed. People do want to move around. People do want to get out of their cars and burn off some energy. So, yeah.
Well, I'm glad you think so. Aurelian, and I'm going to take a license here. I think we've got enough people interested. We're going to have another question after this, but go on, Aurelian. Without being biased, which countries?
Not at all. You know, I'm half British, so you never know what I could say. But yeah, that's a great question, by the way, in the Q&A. So I hope that's the one you pick. No, I would say that actually, in terms of sustainability, the wider sustainability agenda, because as I said, like there is a, you know, mobility for us is part of a wider system. You know, there are countries like Germany or France, which have different, which are more advanced in very specific areas, and you want to look at these either it's certifications or specific buildings where they're using new technologies and new ways of making the buildings kind of come together. Landscaping as well is quite a big topic when you think about mobility. So these are in Europe, countries where there are great things happening, but I would say we get influenced by what's happening within the UK. It's just that we don't necessarily look at, you know, what's happening in terms of cycling and facilities and mobility in the UK, but we try to think about other things. For instance, we see some technology being applied somewhere in a building in Birmingham, and we would try to start to think about, okay, how can we use this technology to implement it in our buildings to improve the user experience. So, you know, small chips, for instance, sensors that can tell you just stick it to every single cycling racks, and then you can have a dashboard that tells you live how many of these racks in the facilities in the basement are available or used. And then you put that on a building management app, for instance, that can tell you, okay, today, you know, to avoid Andrew's nightmare of, you know, midnight email, you have a live feed that says, I can park there, I can use that shower, here's my locker, this is my code. So we're more thinking about, like, let's look at what's in the UK. There's plenty going on, but how do you bring it all together?
So, excellent point. And I could add more to it, but we haven't had enough time. So the last question is going to be a sort of paraphrase of James Partis's question. So he sort of said that there has been this sort of culture war where it's the sort of motorist versus the active travelist, and we all think that's unhelpful, don't we? So what do the panel think about this phenomenon, how it's best tackled to stop it getting out of control? I think we've had a bit of language in our discussion where we haven't touched upon this, but any views? I'm gonna let Jenny go first.
I do have quite a strong view on this one, actually, and I do think it's really unhelpful how it does descend into that. But I think one of the big things that I've learned from our designers across the business is if you design stuff properly and well, there is much less friction on controversial issues. And this is one of them. I had a good chat with our landscape designers and master planners last week about this very issue, particularly relating to Pendleton, where you're creating a low traffic, a low speed street. You're stopping a rat run. You're delivering residential, therefore the residents are happy, but the rat run drivers are unhappy. How do you deal with that conflict? And the main thing, the discussions that they've had through all their engagement have been, if you deliver something that is of high quality in its place, you're able to get over those that disenfranchised driver a lot easier. So if you stick a shitty bollard, excuse my language, in the middle of the road, they're unhappy because there's nothing of quality being delivered. If you put a nice green space that is going to benefit anybody who looks at it, never mind gets to sit at it and participate in it, you're going to get a much softer and easier sell, and because it feels like it's been done for a reason and it's delivered something of quality. And so I think it is about thinking really carefully about what we're changing and how we're demonstrating the quality or how we're delivering quality within that change. So we're not just doing something and making it look crap. We're doing it really, really well, and we're delivering something that benefits lots and lots of people beyond those residents and beyond those people who now gain from having a cycle route that's safer and greener, or whatever it may be. Yeah. And I think that's really important, because it's the only way we're going to get over this kind of disagreement. We're all cyclists and drivers. We know what it's like on both sides. It's a very difficult challenge, but I do think quality is one of the big responses to it.
Yeah, and we'll pick up on some of your technical terms that you use there to describe the quality in the glossary, perhaps as a follow-up. I'm going to give Andrew the next opportunity, and then Aurelian will be our last panelist's talk.
I think over the time since I started cycling, I've definitely seen behaviour improve, and I think the biggest thing's been awareness. We used to joke, so my route was from the city out to Gidea Park. So I'm going through East London, I'm going through Stratford. There's some areas which are a little bit tasty at 5:30 in the morning.
You're using technical terminology as well.
Yeah, okay, well you can. The point is that when I first did this, there were certain cars, let alone drivers. There was a type of car. I mean, if you saw a Nissan Micra, you seriously took your life in your hands, because you knew that person just didn't care, right? And it's not that they didn't care about you, it's just they didn't.
But be careful, there are careful drivers driving Nissan Micras as well.
I'm sure they are. And the new ones are nicer. But seriously, full disclosure, I got T-boned by one, got a straight break through my elbow. So yeah, it's a little bit personal. But after that, and seriously, I couldn't say that about micro drivers now, 10 years on or whatever it is. Purely because I think the education that was done, the awareness that was done with the cycle lanes going in around Stratford. Now, there was a huge amount of investment, right? We know that for the Olympics. And so things were done well. There was money thrown at it. There was money thrown at the education, I think, as well, because the same types of drivers were far more aware. And in fact, it got to a stage where it was actually more dangerous being in cycling around the city at times than it was cycling, say, from Bethnal Green through to Stratford.
So I'm glad, Andrew, that you think that let's say awareness and considerate driving and cyclists has improved. What I do like as well, given we've used the phrase micro mobility, I thought I heard you say micro drivers as well, but I don't think you did say that. So I'm going to let Aurelian have the last word. Fans of Ideas with Beers will know what the last word is and who does that, but Aurelian has it from the panelists today.
Right. Well, because I wouldn't be able to add anything more relevant to what Andrew and Jenny have said, and I agree with that. I may go rogue, Neil, here, and because I see that there is a question from Steve in the Q&A, which is great, which is about existing stock and new build. And I think that's absolutely critical. So I wouldn't be able to sleep if I don't touch on that tonight. But CADWorks, our building in Glasgow, is a new build. And as Steve is mentioning, this is dead easy. This is really, really easy to make sure that you have the right space and put up the right infrastructure. It doesn't cost anything. I've just mentioned that again because this is the argument that you keep on having again and again and again about, rather having, traditional, car park spaces maybe versus showers. And it is not true. I think when you have a blank canvas, you can literally do anything with a bit of design and kind of good thinking about how the space would be used. So that's absolutely easy. The great thing is that's what for we really signed up to the idea of ReTour first. So we're going to go and retain existing structure first and try to avoid as much as possible building up new things. So for instance, the basement and the new build of CADWorks is an existing basement. That's one that we've retained from the previous building that was on top of it. And we've refused to build 2 basements of car park spaces that had been consented. So the planners have said, yeah, you can do that. We said, no, we're not. We're going to, buy this site. We're going to change everything and make it more relevant. So Steve's got a great point. 90% of the stock, which is here today, is going to be here in 10, 20, 30 years. So everyone who's committing like us to net zero carbon by 2025, 30, 35, even 50 has to think about the existing stock right now. How do you make it work? It's more challenging, but it's definitely possible. So Windmill Green in Manchester is a good example. We only could squeeze in 44 cycling racks because we didn't have more space to play with. But as I said, we did the push scooters in the reception area. We have also shared facilities on the rooftop with a pavilion, which is free to use. And we have this pod, the Brumpton pod outside. So there are ways where you just need to spend a bit more time and a bit more brain damage and sessions of kind of, challenging a little bit your team, your PM, your QS, your architects to come together with something a bit more relevant. So thank you, Steve, for the question.
And I think it's a great way to end that. We need to have some brain damage in order to create better projects. So I've loved the conversation with all of you. I'm even more looking forward to delivering your ReTour mug personally, providing you don't live in Scotland. I did it for the London crew. I really don't know where you live, but I will be coming round. So Melissa, would you like to wrap up?
Thank you so much to all of our panel for your time and your input. It's been so interesting listening. The sessions so far we've had been about individual buildings and the fit out, and that's been really interesting in a detailed way, hearing sort of the life cycle from planning to investment and then through to kind of the modular construction at the end. Has been actually, I mean, I get a little bit nerdy about this stuff anyway, but I thought it was fascinating. So I hope that all the audience did as well. And I'm really excited to see how we can do a little bit more of the testing things and trying it out, because I think that's so key to kind of the world at the minute and just giving it a go. So it was great to hear about that and all of your thoughts. Thank you to everyone who is still on the webinar and who has been listening. It has been lovely to have you here, and I hope that you found it interesting. I'm glad that questions did get answered. Steve, I'm sorry yours was right at the end, but thank you for asking questions. If you have liked it, please kind of tell your friends on social media. We are on LinkedIn and there is the Twitter. The next session will be on the rest of the world on the 29th of April. It'll be an earlier time of 9 AM and we should be having guests from Australia, America and Japan. So I'm really excited about that one. It'll be a real kind of broadening of horizons, literally. So I hope that you will come to it. The link to the next one will appear in the chat as we close down, and there should be slides available and right up on the website. So thank you so much. Have a lovely evening, and thank you everyone for your time.